My name is Margot Duval, and I am 43 years old. And I spent 11 years learning to be invisible in the right rooms, before I understood that invisibility has a ceiling. I was standing in the bathroom of the Lakeside Grand Hotel at 7:42 in the evening, 20 minutes before the Lakeshore Arts Conservancy's annual gala was scheduled to begin, looking at myself in the mirror in a green dress I had bought 2 years ago for a different event. And I remember thinking, this is the fourth time I've walked into this particular kind of room in the last 11 years, and it will feel exactly like the last 3. And I am so tired of being right about that. There was a number in my head that I hadn't told anyone. $88,000. And there was a card in the silent auction display downstairs with no name on it, just a donor account number from a fund I'd been building quietly for 3 years. And I was about to walk into a room where my sister-in-law would be the most important person present. And I was about to do that as Theo's wife, the way I always did, the way I had agreed to do without ever formally agreeing to anything. Before we get any further, if you're new here, please take a second to like this video and subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there, because I find it genuinely comforting to know someone is listening at 11 at night in their kitchen or 7 in the morning in their car. I read every single one. It helps me remember why I keep telling these things out loud. Now let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up in Traverse City, Michigan, which is a beautiful town on a lake and which has nothing to do with the story except that it taught me early what it felt like to be in the modest version of things. My father was a commercial fisherman who retired on a disability when I was 12. My mother managed the front books for a small motel near the marina. My brother Owen was 3 years younger than me and significantly easier to love in the way families love people, loudly, with trophies on the mantel. I was not the difficult one, and I was not the favored one. I was the one who handled things. At 17, I submitted a short story to a regional writing competition without telling anyone, because I had already learned that mentioning a thing before it happened meant absorbing everyone's doubt before you'd had a chance to find out if you were right. I won second place. My mother put the certificate in the kitchen drawer. Owen's wrestling trophy was on the living room mantel for 6 years. I am not telling you this to generate sympathy for 17-year-old me. I'm telling you this because the kitchen drawer is a pattern, and patterns don't just live in one house. I went to the University of Michigan on a partial scholarship I found and applied for myself, double majored in English literature and nonprofit management, and paid the rest by working nights at a hotel front desk. I graduated at 22 with $2,600 in debt and a job offer from a small arts organization in Grand Rapids that paid $31,000 a year. I said yes before they finished the sentence. I have been in development work, donor relations, major gift campaigns, grant cycles, for 21 years. I am currently the development director at a mid-sized arts foundation in Grand Rapids, and I earn $94,000 a year, and I am very good at what I do. And I want you to hold that because it matters later. For the past 3 years, I have been quietly making anonymous major gift contributions to the Lakeshore Arts Conservancy through a donor-advised fund I've been building on my own. I do this because I believe in their youth education programming. I also do this anonymously because anonymous giving is cleaner. There is no social machinery in it, no credit to negotiate, no thank you dinner to attend. I find it restoring in a way I find difficult to explain to people who have never worked in fundraising. Nobody at the Conservancy knew the gifts were mine. Specifically, Celeste didn't know. Celeste Breckenridge Holt is 41 years old, and she is the most competent social architect I have ever observed in operation. She is my husband Theo's younger sister, and she has been my sister-in-law for 11 years. And in all of those years, she has been publicly warm to me, in the specific way of someone who has made a deliberate decision to be generous about something she finds substandard. I want to be fair to her, which is something I've been practicing saying in therapy for the past 8 months, because the instinct is to describe her as cruel, and that's not exactly right. She is not cruel. She is strategic. There is a difference. And the difference matters because cruel people do not scare me. Strategic people who believe they are being kind are the ones who are actually dangerous. Celeste chairs the gala. She has chaired it for 6 years. She controls the guest list, the seating, the program, and the auction lots. She invited me because not inviting me would have been noticed, and noticeability is the one thing Celeste consistently manages. I know she invited me because Theo told me she had asked specifically, warmly, that I come. He told me with something like relief. You know how people get when 2 people they love are getting along, how much they need to believe it's real. I love Theo. He is steady and patient and genuinely good at loving me, which is not as common as it should be. And I am not telling this story as a story about him. But I do want you to know that I looked at his face when he told me Celeste had asked for me, and I thought, he still believes it. After 11 years, he still believes it. And I didn't say anything, because the line I will not cross is asking him to choose. I have watched other women in my family issue ultimatums, and I have watched those women become the story, the difficult one, the reason the family broke, and I refused. I have always refused. I walked into the gala and I found my best friend, Teddy Vasquez-Wren, at the bar, and she looked at me over her drink and said, very quietly, "She's going to do the toast thing." And I said, "I know." And we stood at the edge of the crowd in the way of 2 women who have spent their careers in rooms like this and understood, without discussing it, exactly what was about to happen. Teddy has been my closest friend for 14 years. She runs her own philanthropic consultancy, and she is the person I call when I can't make myself say the true thing out loud, which means I call her often. She was wearing a burgundy wrap dress and a smartwatch she refuses to take off anywhere, and she looked like someone who had dressed for the event rather than for the room, which is a distinction I have always loved about her. And then something happened that I hadn't planned for. A woman named Patricia Ellsworth, a board member of the Conservancy I had met once, briefly, at a regional giving symposium 2 years earlier, crossed the room toward me. Not toward Celeste, who was 3 feet to my left, toward me. She said, "Are you Margot Duval from the Whitmore Foundation gift report?" And I said yes, and she said she'd been hoping to connect about a collaborative grant cycle, and we spent 8 minutes talking about regional arts infrastructure in a way that had nothing to do with who I was married to. Celeste watched this from across the room. I wasn't looking at her, but Teddy was. Teddy told me later what Celeste's face did when she saw her organization's board member standing with Margot Duval, like Margot Duval was someone worth standing with. She said it was a small thing, half a second of recalibration, but it happened, and I felt it happen even without seeing it, the way you feel a temperature drop before you see the clouds. I didn't celebrate it. I filed it in the same place I file everything, the back of my mind, where I keep the list of small, true things that nobody believes until there are enough of them. I have been keeping that list for 8 years. I had no idea that tonight was the night it was going to stop being a list and start being evidence. The dinner was set for 8. I sat at table 7 with Theo on my left, an empty chair on my right that was eventually filled by a man from the Conservancy's real estate committee, who spent the appetizer course telling Theo about boat storage rates on the East Shore. Teddy was at table 9, 2 rows over, positioned, I realized later, with the specific intentionality of someone who had looked at the seating chart in advance and made a decision. I did not know yet that she had come to this gala with something in her bag that was going to change the shape of the evening. I was still operating on the assumption that this would be a night I endured well. The room was what it always was. 140 people in formal wear, the clatter of a hotel ballroom trying to sound intimate, the silent auction display along the south wall with its laminated lock cards, and the satisfying quiet of paddles and anonymous cards waiting to be filled. I know this kind of room the way a mechanic knows an engine. I have spent 21 years standing in versions of this space, working it, reading it, watching what money does when it's being watched by other money. The thing people outside this sector don't understand is that a gala is not a party. A party is for the guests. A gala is a structured ask in formal wear, and everything, the lighting, the seating, the sequence of the program, is engineered to move people toward yes. I helped design 6 of these events at my own organization. I can read the architecture of an evening like Celeste had built this one, and tell you exactly where she put the pressure points. The toast was a pressure point. I knew it was coming. It came between the salad and the entree, the way these things always do. Early enough that people are still drinking, late enough that the room has settled. Celeste stood. The room quieted with the practiced ease of a room that has learned to pay attention to her. She was wearing a champagne-colored beaded gown that had required at least one fitting, and she held her glass with the relaxed certainty of someone who has done this many times and known each time that the room was with her. She thanked the board. She thanked the major donors. She didn't name them individually. She never names individuals early. That's a pressure point she saves. Then she turned toward the family table, toward Theo, toward me, and she said, "I especially want to acknowledge my sister-in-law, Margot, who has been such a quiet and steady presence supporting this family's love of the arts for more than a decade. She may not always be at the center of things, but she's always been here." The room applauded. Theo squeezed my hand. I smiled. I would like you to sit with that toast for a moment because it is a masterwork. Every word in it is technically true, and none of it is actually accurate. She may not always be at the center of things. She's always been here. She took 11 years of me not being at the center of things. 11 years of Christmas dinners where my name was moved to the subordinate clause. 11 years of family introductions where my job was described as working in arts or something. 11 years of being present and unaccounted for. And she handed it back to me in public as a compliment. And the room applauded, and Theo squeezed my hand, and I smiled. If you have ever been accurately described in a way that was designed to make you smaller, you know the specific internal temperature of that moment. It is not hot. It is a very particular kind of cold. After the toast, I excused myself to look at the silent auction display. I do this at every event I attend. It's a professional reflex. I can't help it. I read the lot cards the way some people read menus. And I stopped at lot 14. The naming opportunity for the Conservancy's new youth education wing. Opening bid, $75,000. I pulled out the anonymous card. I wrote a number. I did not write my name. I put the card in the slot. And then I went back to the table and I ate my entree and I talked to the boat storage man and I watched Celeste work the room with the efficiency of someone who has built this event from the ground up and knows every corner of it. She did not know what was in that lot 14 slot. She did not know what had been in the Conservancy's donor records for 3 years. She was the chair of this organization's gala. I want you to sit with that too. Then Teddy found me during the dessert course. She came to my chair and crouched down and said, very quietly, "I need you to see something." She held out her phone with both hands, the way you hold something breakable. I looked at it. It was an email chain, 6 months old. A colleague of ours, a man named Russell who manages mid-level donor relations at a regional community foundation, had been included on the chain accidentally, had not realized it for weeks, and when he finally read the full thread, had forwarded it to Teddy with a single line, "I think you should know about this." The chain was between Celeste Breckenridge Holt and David Kwan, the Conservancy's executive director. In it, Celeste expressed what she called some concern about recent anonymous major gifts to the organization. She said she wanted to be thoughtful about stewardship and suggested that the board should be careful about building program dependency on gifts from sources the family isn't fully familiar with. She did not name me. She could not name me. She didn't know. She was trying to cast a shadow on my professional orbit without being able to identify it. She had been attempting to poison the Conservancy's confidence in their own anonymous donor, who was her own sister-in-law, because she had looked at the pattern of giving and suspected, somehow, that it came from somewhere adjacent to Margot's world, and she had acted on that suspicion before she knew the truth. I read the chain 3 times. Teddy watched my face. Then I said, "She doesn't know." Teddy said, "She really doesn't know." I put the phone down on the tablecloth between us. I looked up at the auction display along the south wall. Lot 14. I thought about the number I had written on that card. I thought about the pattern of the last 3 years, the gifts I had made because I believed in this work, not because anyone would see me making it. I thought about the kitchen drawer and the trophy on the mantle and the toast and the email chain and all the specific ways a person can be managed out of her own story. And then I thought something I am not proud of, something I would not normally admit out loud. I thought, good that she doesn't know yet, because she is about to find out in a room of 140 people, and I did not plan this, and I am not going to stop it. I am going to let it happen exactly the way things happen when you have been telling the truth for 3 years and the record is finally going to speak. I looked at Teddy. She looked at me. She said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Ask me in an hour." And then something else happened. Just before the live auction was scheduled to begin, Patricia Ellsworth appeared again. She had the specific momentum of a woman with a purpose, and she brought someone with her. She said, "Margot, I want you to meet David Kwan. David runs the Conservancy." David Kwan shook my hand. He said he was grateful for the sector's sustained attention to mid-size arts organizations. He said it in the specific tone of someone who has been thinking about how to say it for a while. Celeste was 5 feet away, adjusting a centerpiece, speaking quietly to a catering manager. She heard the introduction. I watched her hear it. I watched her understand that her executive director was thanking her sister-in-law for something. She didn't yet know what, but she heard the register of it, the weight of professional gratitude extended to a person she had described to this same man as peripheral, as quiet, as always there but never at the center. She kept her expression correct. She is very good at keeping her expression correct. But I saw what Teddy later confirmed she also saw. For 1 second, Celeste Breckenridge Holt did not know what room she was in. The live auction was about to begin. I sat down. I folded my hands in my lap. I waited. The live auction started at 9:45, and Greg Hollis, the auctioneer, was exactly the kind of professional you hire for this circuit. Easy with the room, funny without being exhausting, the kind of man who can make a $120 wine experience feel like a privilege, and a naming opportunity feel like a legacy. He worked through lots 1 through 13 with the efficiency of someone who understands that pacing is everything. You don't rush to the big lot, you build toward it, you let the room's generosity accumulate. I had helped design auction sequences for 6 events at my own organization. I knew what Greg Hollis was doing. I knew we were building toward lot 14. I watched him work. I watched Celeste stand near the east wall with a clipboard and her event coordinator, occasionally touching her earpiece the way people do when they want to look indispensable. She was doing her job. She is very good at her job. I want you to know that even in that moment, sitting at table 7 with Teddy's email chain still fresh in my mind, I did not feel triumphant about what was coming. I felt something I can only describe as tired and awake at the same time. The specific sensation of being someone who has been carrying a weight so long that when the moment comes to put it down, you're not sure your arms know how to stop. If you have ever done something right for years without anyone knowing you did it, you know that the prospect of being seen is not simple. It is not uncomplicated joy. It is also fear, also exposure, Also, the terrible intimacy of being known accurately in a room that has been knowing you wrong. Greg Hollis called Lot 14. He described the naming opportunity for the Conservancy's new youth education wing, the building campaign, the projected enrollment, the programming that would serve 312 children annually from under-resourced households in the greater Grand Rapids area. He said the naming opportunity would be recognized on the building's entry plaque, in all Conservancy publications for the next 15 years, and in the organization's permanent donor record. The opening bid was $75,000. 3 paddles went up. Greg worked them. The room leaned in the way rooms do when the number gets serious. 80,000. 82. He looked at the lot desk. He picked up the card reader and the anonymous card. He said he had an anonymous floor bid. If you have ever watched a live auction, you know this moment. When the auctioneer acknowledges a bid that was placed in advance, before the room opened, it changes the temperature of the bidding. It signals that someone cared about this lot specifically, not just about the competition. Greg Hollis read the amount, $88,000. The room went quiet, not the dead silence of shock, but the loaded silence of recalibration. The sound of 140 people revising their assumptions about the evening's biggest gift. And then the procedural error happened. I need to explain this because the error is not a detail. The error is the whole thing. The Conservancy had recently upgraded their auction management software. The donor-advised fund I use for anonymous giving was linked to that system through a third-party giving platform. The anonymous bid card was supposed to suppress the donor name and display only the fund account number. But in the software migration, the display setting for donor-advised fund accounts had been reset to default, which pulled the account holder's legal name from the fund's registration. Greg Hollis looked at the card reader. He looked at the name field. He had no reason to know this was supposed to be anonymous. He read it out the way he would read any donor's name. Margot Elaine Duval. That was the moment. I want to describe it accurately because it happened in layers, the way large things do, and each layer landed at a slightly different speed. The first layer was pure sound, my full name in a microphone in a room of 140 people, none of whom had ever heard it said in this context. The second layer was Theo's hand on my arm. Not squeezing, just landing, the way you reach for someone when you're not sure if they need steadying. The third layer was David Kwan. He was at the head table, 6 feet from where Celeste was standing with her clipboard. He heard my name and his face did something I recognized, because I have been in development work for 21 years, and I have seen this specific expression before. The expression of a person who has suspected something for a long time and just had it confirmed. He stood. He began to applaud. Patricia Ellsworth stood. 3 other board members stood. And then, because a room of 140 people will follow when the people who understand the full weight of a thing begin to respond, the room stood. I sat at table 7. I did not move for 2 seconds. Teddy was at table 9, and she told me later that she watched my face, and that what she saw was not triumph, not relief, not tears. She said I looked like someone who had just been told a true thing about herself that she had been waiting to hear for a very long time, and didn't quite know yet whether she was allowed to accept it. I stood. I said briefly that I believed in the education programming and that I was grateful to have been able to support it. I said it looking at David Kwan, not at Celeste. Then I sat down. And this is the moment that cost me something, because part of me wanted very much to look at Celeste right then, to let her see my face at that specific moment, to give her the full weight of what had just happened and watch her receive it. I did not do it. I picked up my water glass. My hand was steady. Teddy told me later that Celeste's face, in the moment my name was read, went through 4 expressions in approximately 3 seconds: confusion, recognition, understanding, and then a kind of composure that she reached for and caught, just barely, like something you grab at the last moment before it falls. She was still applauding when she caught it. She applauded until the room sat down. She is very good at her job. Greg Hollis, bless him, moved immediately to lots 15 and 16 with professional fluency, the way a good auctioneer does, never letting a room linger in a moment longer than the moment can hold. But in the corridor outside the main hall, 20 minutes after the auction ended, while the dessert plates were being cleared and the band was setting up, Celeste found me. She came to stand next to me the way you approach someone you intend to address privately. Close, angled slightly away from the main flow of traffic, her voice controlled and quiet. She said, "You could have told me." I looked at her. I had been waiting 11 years for a conversation that had the right shape, and this was not the conversation I had imagined, but it had the right shape. I said, "I've been doing this work for 3 years, Celeste. You had an opinion about it before you knew it was mine." She was quiet. Her hands were still. I have never seen Celeste Breckenridge Holt without a response. She has always had a response, gracious, managed, architecturally correct. She looked at me for a moment and then she said, "The family should have known." I said, "The family will." Then I walked back into the ballroom. I did not look back. I found Theo at the bar. He looked at me for a long moment and said nothing. Then he said, "How long?" I said 3 years. He said, "The full amount?" I said the full amount. He put his drink down on the bar very carefully, the way people handle things when they're afraid of their own reaction. And he said, very quietly, "Why didn't you tell me?" I said, "Because it wasn't about us." He was quiet for a long time, and then, and this is the thing about Theo that I have loved for 11 years, the thing that makes him worth all the patience. He said, "I think I've let some things go on too long." Not a question, not a performance, just accurate. I put my hand on his arm. I said, "Yes." We stood there for a while. The band started playing something low, and the room reorganized around us, and I felt, for the first time in a long time, like I was standing in the correct version of my own life. Then my phone lit up on the table behind us. I turned and saw the name on the screen. It was David Kwan. I didn't answer that night. The moment wasn't right. The room was still buzzing with the last third of the event, and I have a professional practice of not taking calls in social settings. But his number was in my phone the next morning when I woke up at 6:41 in the hotel room with Theo asleep beside me and the particular clarity of a person who had not slept as badly as she expected. I lay there for a while with the gray light coming in under the curtains, and I thought about what the day was going to ask of me. David's voicemail was brief and measured, the voice of an executive who has learned to separate information from affect, and he said he'd like to find a time to speak, that he wanted to express something properly, and that he had been hoping to have a conversation with Margot Duval for some time. I sat with that for a while. I sat with the specific strangeness of being recognized accurately by a professional stranger at the same moment you are being misrecognized by family. I called him back 2 days later. In the weeks that followed, the natural consequences of that evening arrived the way natural consequences do, without drama, without a confrontation scene, without anyone having to issue a verdict. The Conservancy's event coordinator sent a formal apology to my donor account within 48 hours regarding the software error, offering to re-anonymize my giving history. I wrote back and told her it wasn't necessary. The 3 years of major gifts, which totaled, across the anonymous fund, $164,000 in education programming support, were formally acknowledged in the Conservancy's quarterly donor report. My name appeared in print for the first time as a Conservancy contributor. David Kwan and I had a 40-minute conversation that I found restoring in the way I find anonymous giving restoring. Clean, purposeful, without social machinery. He said he had suspected the gifts were mine for about 2 years, based on the fund's documentation and some structural similarities to giving patterns he'd observed at my organization. He said he'd made a decision not to press the anonymity because he understood what anonymous giving meant to people in the sector. He said the education wing naming would be offered to me through the proper channels and that there was no pressure attached. I told him I'd think about it, and I meant it. And I did think about it for 3 weeks before I said yes. Not because I wanted my name on a building, but because 312 kids a year from under-resourced households were going to walk through that door, and I wanted the public record to reflect that someone who looked like their teachers, who worked in a middle-class nonprofit job, who had not inherited anything, had believed in them enough to build it. Teddy called me the morning after the gala and said, well, in the tone of someone who had watched something they'd been waiting to watch and wasn't going to pretend otherwise. I told her about the corridor conversation with Celeste. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, that was the right thing to say, and I said I hoped so. I asked her about the email chain and what she was planning to do with it. She said she had already contacted Russell, the colleague who forwarded it, and that Russell had written to David Kwan directly to provide context about how the chain had come to his attention. He had not characterized Celeste's intent, just explained what had been forwarded and to whom. David had thanked him. Teddy said, David's not going to blow it up. He just needed to know. And that, as it turned out, was enough. 3 weeks after the gala, Celeste resigned from the Conservancy's program committee. She remained on the board. The resignation was described in the board's internal communication as a voluntary step back to allow new committee leadership to develop. I know this because Patricia Ellsworth told me, simply and without editorial comment, over coffee at a regional giving forum. I said thank you. Patricia said, you've been doing good work for a long time. I did not say anything else. I am still working on receiving things gracefully. The Breckenridge parents called me the following Sunday. Not through Theo, not with Celeste as a context setter, directly. My mother-in-law's number on my phone at 10 in the morning. She said they had seen the Conservancy's report. She said they were proud of what I'd built. She said it simply and she meant it, and I believed her, and I also thought, this call should have happened years ago, in dozens of other forms, and it didn't, and I have carried the weight of its absence for a long time. I said thank you. I did not say anything else. I am also working on that. Theo and I did not have the big conversation in one sitting. We had pieces of it over several weeks. On the back porch with coffee, in the car on a long drive north, once in the kitchen at 11 at night when neither of us could sleep. He said one evening, I missed a lot, didn't I? It was not a question. I said yes. He sat with that. He did not try to reframe it or minimize it or explain what he had been thinking at the time. He just sat with it. That is the thing about Theo. He knows how to receive a true thing without deflecting. I told him about the observation notebooks. I told him there were 4 of them, going back 8 years. He asked if I would ever let him read them. I said maybe. I said, some of what's in there is mine. He said, okay. And that was the right answer. The gifts continue. I renewed my donor-advised fund for a 4th year. The Conservancy knows now. The anonymity has technically ended, and I give anyway, because I understand now, and this took me a while to understand, that the anonymity was never about hiding from recognition. It was about giving in a way that was clean of the social machinery I work inside every day. A way of saying, I believe in this, separate from every system that requires me to be believed in back. The gala taught me something I should have already known and didn't, which is that visibility and recognition are not the same thing. I had been avoiding visibility because I had learned that visibility in the wrong context, managed by the wrong narrative, felt like being put in the kitchen drawer. I had not understood that visibility in the right context, arrived at through the actual record of what you have done, feels like something else entirely. It feels like the moment when the room stands before you've said a word. It feels like your name in a microphone. It feels like a kind of settling, not triumph, not relief, not the victory lap your younger self wanted, just the quiet weight of the truth having the same address as your life. I am Margot Duval. I am 43 years old. I am still the eldest of three, still the one who handles things. I still keep the observation notebooks, though I've started a fifth one and the entries are getting shorter because I am less surprised by things than I used to be. I still go to events like the Gala and stand at the edge of the room and read the architecture of the evening and know exactly where the pressure points are. Last spring, I attended the groundbreaking ceremony for the Conservancy's Youth Education Wing. It was a Tuesday morning, a small gathering, board members, staff, a few donors. The architect explained the design. David Kwan spoke. Patricia Ellsworth spoke. I stood in the back in my work clothes, dark pants, my good navy blazer, my grandmother's gold studs, and I looked at the ground that was about to become a building, and I thought about the 17-year-old who put a story in a competition without telling anyone, who won second place, whose certificate lived in a kitchen drawer for years. I thought, she did okay. She found her way to the right rooms eventually. She just had to stop letting other people decide what her name meant in them. After the ceremony, Teddy found me in the parking lot. We stood by my car for a while. She asked me how I felt. I said, settled. She said, that's a good word for it. I said it was the only one that fit. She asked if I was ready to get back to work. I said yes. We got in our separate cars. I drove back to the office. I had a grant cycle to close and 3 donor calls in the afternoon, and a quiet Tuesday in the only room where I have always been exactly the right size. If any part of this story sat with you, if you have ever been the one in the kitchen drawer, if you have ever done the right thing in a room where no one was recording it, if you have ever been toasted by someone who was managing you while the room applauded, leave me a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what time it is. Tell me your version of the night the record spoke for you. If you've been here a while, thank you. If this is the first one of these you've listened to, I hope it felt like something true. Like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe so you're here for the next one. I'll be back soon.